But we'll move on. So we're transitioning from biodiversity into human diversity with Suchinta Arif. So Suchinta is one of my friends from way back in Toronto. We were both at the same field center together working on different kinds of research. And she's also a doctoral candidate at Dalhousie University and co-founder of the BIPOC-led and focused science outreach group, Diversity of Nature. And she's going to talk to us about how they got started, what they've done over the last 2 years, and give us some tips on how to create inclusive science outreach for underrepresented audiences. So thank you for being here, Suchinta, and the virtual floor is yours.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Becky. I'm obviously very honored to be speaking to everyone here today. I'm going to see if I can share my screen without too many issues. Okay, did that work?
Looks good.
Awesome, thanks so much. All right, so as Becky has introduced me, my name is Suchinta Arif. I am a PhD candidate at Dalhousie University, where my research predominantly focuses on marine conservation work. And with my colleague, Melanie Massey, who is also a PhD candidate at Dalhousie University, 2 years ago, around this time today, we started the idea for our initiative, Diversity of Nature, which is now a BIPOC-focused scientific outreach organization within Dalhousie University. And the premise of this program is that we provide cost-free and immersive ecological and natural science outreach to BIPOC youth across Nova Scotia and Canada. So I wanted to start out by giving a personal take on how and why we got started. So it was actually around this week, exactly 2 years ago, right after the unfortunate passing of George Floyd, where many of us were having national and regional conversations about racial inequities and trying to come up with solutions of what we can do to make things more equitable. So Melanie and I were actually taking our dogs on a walk on this dike in Wolfville, Nova Scotia, which might be familiar to some of you. And it was a lovely day. And for some reason, we just couldn't really focus on the dogs in the day. We kept coming back to this very important topic because it was very meaningful to us. And after an hour of conversation, what we landed on was this. Racial inequities are found throughout institutions across Canada. So it's not just kind of predominant in one area and less so in others. So what we realized was that we can actually take any one space and any one field and try to work towards making it more equitable. So we thought, what better way than to start with where we're at? So we are graduate students studying ecology, so let's start in that space at the intersection of ecology, natural science, and academia. And then we delved a little bit into our own journey. And although we were successful graduate students who were relatively happy and fulfilled with what we were doing, we realized that there were barriers that we had to cross as racialized women in science. One of them was when we often did take part in field trips or ecological experiences, we were often feeling isolated as the only racialized people there. And what added on to that was that very rarely did we see people in leadership positions teaching us about ecology and the natural world that reflected our identity or lived experiences. And another thing we realized was some of the most meaningful experiences that we've had that really encouraged us to stay in ecology were often cost prohibitive. So personally for me, the most exciting time for my undergraduate degree that I did at the University of Toronto was when I got to take a few field courses at the Banfield Marine Sciences Center, which is in a remote place in British Columbia. But this was the most expensive part of my degree. It cost around $6,000 to spend 2 months there. And these opportunities may not be available for many marginalized youth and students. So with that in mind, by the end of that talk, we had a lot of energy and a lot of ideas. And what we came up with was that we really wanted to create a cost-free ecology field camp that would be geared exclusively towards BIPOC youth in Nova Scotia, and it would be taught by BIPOC graduate students. So we're limiting the 3 barriers that we previously were talking on. So one, the youth will not feel isolated because the whole field camp is for BIPOC youth. They'll get to see leadership that they can identify with and relate to, because it's led by BIPOC graduate students, and the whole thing would be free, therefore limiting the financial barriers. And so we each came to it with some specific initial skill sets. So we had previous teaching experience because that's just something that we love doing. As PhD candidates, we had a set of ecological knowledge that we felt confident that we could pass on to the next generation. And perhaps most important, we had a lot of willpower. There was no one that could tell us we couldn't do this. We were very determined. So that week we got everything started. We created our website, diversityofnature.com. We created our logo that we got really excited about, and these things still stand today. So if you go on our website, we still have that logo there that we created that first week. And things really took off like exponentially for the following months. And we were very fortunate to get a lot of support from people both within and outside of Dalhousie. So a picture here in the right are just some of the supporters that came out during those first months. So the person here is Aaron McNeil, who is my supervisor. So he's been helping us by being the ghost principal investigator for a lot of these grants that we've won, because they won't give these grants to graduate students. They have to go to faculty. So he's been very helpful with that. We've gotten a lot of financial and moral support from Dalhousie University, as well as outreach organizations in Nova Scotia, such as Supernova, Imhotep's Legacy Academy, and Wise Atlantic. One of our first financial help came from the Nova Scotia Bird Society, so we'll always be forever thankful to them. And of course, MEOPAR, which stands for the Marine Environmental Observation, Prediction, and Response Network, actually quadrupled our crowdfund that we raised within the first few months, giving us substantial startup funds that really made a lot of things possible. So still here on the left, you see our initial goals. And after a year of what seemed like exponential creativity and growth, our programming actually ended up expanding far beyond what we originally had imagined. So a year into it, we ran our first ecology field camp. So you can see at the bottom some photos from 15 BIPOC youth that participated. We actually ran 2 different sessions that year. So in total, we reached 30 BIPOC youth. And I'm happy to report that many of these students have kept coming back to ongoing programming, and we've created kind of a longer term mentorship with them. So we've established the annual ecology field camp, but on top of that, given all the support that we got and the expansiveness of the programming, we now also have monthly workshops where different workshop leaders who are BIPOC and often early career come in, and depending on their interests, they run their own community science outreach events. So in the past, this has included things such as fish dissection workshops, as well as panels where people get together like experts from scientific fields and then connect them with the community, as well as more immersive experiences such as snorkeling expeditions. Given the funding support that we had, we also now have annual scholarships for BIPOC youth that participate in our program and then go on to pursue post-secondary STEM disciplines. And this, of course, just adds another layer of incentive for them to keep going down the ecology and science journey. One of the important things we do is that we provide ongoing mentorship. So we really do feel like we've created a Dawn community where the students know that they can reach out to us, as well as other leaders, as well as their peers, if at any point they need assistance or guidance. So we've had students reach out to us for reference letters, as well as just to ask for advice on what courses they should take in their first year of university, for example. And so far, through all of our programming, we've reached over 300 BIPOC youth to date through cost-free and immersive experiences. And one of the things I wanted to highlight was when Melanie and I were spending a lot of time with this program, like developing this program, we heard from a lot of older professors that we should really focus on the research, because we both do want to be professors when we grow up. And contrary to their advice, what I've found is that I've gained a lot of skills that I think would be very valuable in that professor position that I otherwise would not have gained if I didn't lean into this outreach work and this community work. So for example, I've gotten a lot of experience in grant writing, as well as program development. So in addition to Diversity of Nature, we also work with the Faculty of Science at Dalhousie University, and we're creating or co-creating the Dalhousie Scholars and Leaders Program, which essentially is a program aimed at undergraduates who are underrepresented. And the aim is to try to help them navigate their journey so that they succeed in their scientific degrees. We've, of course, learned a lot of leadership and organizational skills through managing employees and training undergraduates, for example, which, of course, I think would be useful if I'm a professor and I have a lab to run. We learn from our peers and our collaborators every day about how to put on inclusive science and outreach. This is, of course, ongoing work. This has greatly enhanced our network. So for example, my postdoc supervisor, who I'll be working with hopefully in a few months, actually heard of me through Diversity of Nature and not necessarily through my research work. And of course, we've been fortunate enough to publish a lot of our work with our programming with respect to teaching and increasing equity in STEM. So the point of this slide is just if there are other early career researchers that are thinking about creating a more holistic academic experience for themselves, for example, by doing more scientific outreach or leaning into that, my advice would be to go for it, because along with making your journey more meaningful, you'll also gain these skills that will help with the other elements of your scientific journey. So one of the things that we realized when building our program is that there was a huge capacity or a huge need to build capacity for early career researchers with respect to scientific outreach and science communication. So at first we were a bit naive. We just thought if we gave the opportunities for early BIPOC scholars to come in and take on leadership positions, they would just kind of know how to run their outreach and relate to their communities. And for a lot of the cases that was true, but there was still this need to actually provide training, because that's not necessarily something a lot of students and graduate students are getting. So in addition to our outreach that we do with youth, we also provide science outreach training through conferences that we put together, through internships, and through undergraduate and graduate courses. So I'm just going to go through two of the training initiatives that we took on this year. So the first one was our inaugural Ecological Science Communication Conference that we held a few months ago, where we hosted 12 diverse and early career researchers who studied in ecology and natural science, but spent a majority of their time doing scientific outreach and communication. And they taught the rest of us about various topics, including conservation outreach, effective scientific communication, so how to translate these complex ideas and disseminate them in an engaging way to the public, as well as how to provide more inclusive outreach. So we had around 200 Canadian and international people register for the event, and it allowed us to have this very interactive and holistic experience where we all gained a lot of networking opportunities by connecting with other ecologists that were also interested in science outreach. And another thing me and Melanie did this year was we actually taught a graduate module called the Scientific Outreach Graduate Module, where we worked with 8 different graduate students in the biology department at Dalhousie University, and we taught them about translating science, about logistics, how to put together an event, how to make it immersive. And at the end of the course, their assignment was to put together their own one-day scientific outreach event. And so these are just some of the examples of the different stuff that they all decided to do. You can see that there's a huge range. So for example, Emily Cormier and Nakia Cullen, they did a shark scientist panel where they got together diverse shark scientists from across the globe, and then they connected them to young students that were interested in pursuing shark science or just had questions about sharks or marine scientists. And it was a very engaging online event. We also had an in-person event hosted by Anna Martins recently, where she got a bunch of stingrays and helped students learn about stingrays, sharks, and got them to dissect. Every student got the chance to dissect their own stingray. And you can see here in the picture was the youngest participant who was like, what on earth is this? We definitely got the dad to encourage him. The dad is a marine biologist, so that's why he was that young. So as you can see, when you do train early career researchers on scientific outreach, what it taught me was that it really does pay it forward, because then they're equipped with the tools to then go out and reach their communities in a meaningful way. And everyone who took part of this in this graduate module actually let us know that first, it was their first event that they held, and second, that they were all interested in continuing to do that in the future. And we're continuing to work with a lot of them to make that happen. So I also just wanted to go through some examples of some of the events that we led through our programming itself. So one of the highlights was led by Leah Kresser that you see presented here. So she is an Indigenous Mi'kmaq scholar and ecologist who's doing her master's in Acadia University. And so for her event, she decided to take us all to the Bedford Barrens, where you have these Mi'kmaq petroglyphs. And she thought this was a meaningful space to teach us all about Mi'kmaq culture as well as Mi'kmaq ecology. She helped us identify the different plants we saw in that environment, and she gave us the medicinal purposes of them. And she also contrasted some of her knowledge with Western science and how it contrasted and also how it complemented one another. And what was really valuable was that she sat us all down and she went through her own scientific journey and her struggles as an Indigenous scholar and how she overcame them. And in the end, many of the students came back to us and told us that although they now hear about things such as Indigenous ecology in the curriculum, it's a whole different experience to actually learn it firsthand from an Indigenous scholar, and to have them give you that knowledge from their leadership. So that was really meaningful and interesting. Another example is the fish dissection workshop led by an undergraduate student, actually, Aaron Judah. So this was his first time running a scientific outreach event. And we went to local fishermen and we got local bycatch from the community. And then he taught all the kids about fish diversity and function, and then gave them the option to choose their own fish, which he then helped them dissect. So here's just an example of a student that had no idea what she was in for, but was very happy by the end, dissecting her fish. And then just as one last example, we now do annual snorkeling events because the first snorkeling event that we did last year was such a hit. So this is where we took 15 BIPOC students that have never gone snorkeling, that have never really entered the cold ocean. We trained them on the first day on safety and gear fitting, and on the second day, we threw them in the ocean with a lot of safety precautions, of course. So it was all their first time doing it, and they got this very interactive and immersive experience where they got to see marine life firsthand and learn directly from marine scientists. So that was very, and like as soon as we put up that event, like it filled up within like an hour. So we knew that this is something that had a lot of popularity. So now we're doing it yearly. So the main thing I learned from all of this experience is the importance of diverse scientific perspectives. So to put it simply, diverse scholars bring diverse scientific perspectives, and giving them the option and opportunity to highlight and integrate these perspectives into a scientific outreach leads to better science education. So students have mentioned that a lot of the content that we cover is eye-opening and relatable and not something that they would otherwise have access to in the classroom. So when I first envisioned this programming, I was on that talk, I just wanted to kind of limit some of the barriers to them getting to engage in science and ecology and natural sciences. And what I learned through this programming is they're actually also getting different scientific content because it's creating more holistic ways of teaching and learning, and we're learning from them as well. So I just want to end off with some upcoming events. So again, we have our next snorkeling expedition coming up in June, and this time around, we're also going to be training 2 future BIPOC workshop leaders who will then hopefully be teaching the 2023 and 2024 snorkeling expeditions. We have a Halifax Shark Week, which will be led by undergraduate marine biologist Aaron Judah, who will be putting together a week-long series of events that help youth across Nova Scotia learn about the importance of shark conservation as well as shark science. And then we have our first ever overnight ecology camp, because the other ones, due to COVID, had to be day camps, coming up in September. So we're all pretty excited about that. And I know I'm running out of time probably, but I just wanted to conclude by saying, if there's anyone that has an idea for scientific outreach or creating meaningful changes in their communities, my advice would be to just go for it and not limit yourself in any way. Because as you saw from my initial skill set, it wasn't that expansive. And what really got me going was just kind of believing in the idea and kind of letting that grow. And I think it could go far beyond what you initially imagined for yourself. And it gives you back a lot more than you're able to give in a lot of ways. So I'll end off by saying that if anyone is interested in collaborating or registering their kids or just discussing different things with us or potentially donating, please feel free to visit our website at diversityofnature.com.
Thank you, Suchinta. That was really inspiring, and you made it sound like starting a whole organization while you're getting your PhD is no big deal. So, well done.
Thank you. Well, it wasn't. It actually made the PhD seem so much more fulfilling. Like, I'm about to graduate soon in the next few months, and this has been a very wonderful part of it, right? So it actually made it kind of a better experience, I would say, rather than making it harder.
Well, that's nice. Feel free to stick your questions, comments in the chats, folks. I have one question for you, and then I will move on to our next speaker just for the sake of time. But folks, do feel free to put stuff into the chat. I'm wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit about or I guess maybe give us tips around how we get people out to our first couple initiatives. So a lot of member groups within Nature Nova Scotia are, for the most part, really just starting to engage diverse audiences now. And sometimes with varying degrees of success, or sometimes reaching different kinds of audiences depending on where they are in the province and what tactics they're using. I'm wondering if you have any tips about where are those low-hanging fruits, where are the people who you first reach out to, and how do you create a meaningful experience with that small audience as you're starting to grow? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you mean. I think the main thing we did was we reached out to leaders in the community that worked with diverse youth. So there was one teacher in particular, Mrs. D from Halifax West, that was very engaging, and the students really loved her. And we reached out to her, and she got I think she's put through at least 30 of her diverse kids through our programming so far. And of course, they're going to listen to her because they have that strong connection with her. And we're also working with other organizations such as Generation One Leadership Initiative, which is another outreach organization that's focused on Black Nova Scotians. And so so my main advice would be to connect with community leaders that have youth that they can then connect to you. And you can also create events in collaboration with them. And I think that would be a good way to kind of start it off so that you get to kind of borrow from their network of students.